Hey, Alec Miller here, founder of Royals and Rogues, and today I want to talk to you about fear. So right now we're in pretty trying times and there's a lot of fear going around. But what I want to talk about is why as a business or as a creative, you shouldn't make decisions based on fear. You see, my whole goal here is to help creatives understand business and businesses better understand creatives. And something that's common between both of them is their ability to give into fear. We see a lot of businesses doing that right now by firing a whole bunch of staff, being afraid they won't be able to pay them or make ends meet, or that this will last longer than they think. And we also see a lot of people being very afraid, and whether or not they've been let go, preparing resumes, trying to prepare for the worst, and sometimes making brash decisions like pulling all their money out of their savings or out of their bank account or out of their 401k just to stockpile right now. And I think that's a mistake, because whenever you act on your fear, chances are it's the wrong action. So my mom has this saying, and it's not her saying necessarily, but it's one that she always said to me growing up, so I'm attributing it to her. And that's that fear serves you by handing you over to the thing you fear. And this has been a trope for a very long time. It's archetypical, meaning it's like the pinnacle example of this thing. In every horror movie ever, the action that somebody takes to get away from the monster is the very thing that leads them to the monster. In a lot of Greek tragedy and classics, things like Oedipus Rex, the fear of a prediction about somebody growing up to kill their father, the actions taken to avoid those things happening are the very things that cause that action. We also see this with parents that are too controlling, right? They really control their kid, afraid that they're going to do something wrong, only to have that kid, when they get older and get some freedom, to completely abuse it and go off the deep end. This is also the story of classics like Sleeping Beauty. Jordan Peterson has a really good breakdown of this archetype, right? He calls it the Oedipal mother, but essentially what it is, taking actions because you're afraid based on fear, and that action giving you over to the thing you fear. So in this case, we really need to avoid this when it comes to our businesses and us as creatives. And I'm going to tell you a little story about a time where I acted on fear and how it ended up. So a while back ago, I was coming to the end of my first full year of freelancing. It had been going very well and I was making really good money, but I was making all of it from really one major client that was paying all of my bills. And that project was coming to an end right around December. If you know anything about marketing, you generally know that most of the ad dollars are spent in the holiday season, and then it all kind of dries up until about February or March, when everyone has their yearly budget set and after they've recovered from spending all their money in December. Most companies spend January taking account for the previous year, preparing taxes, as well as planning out the year ahead. And seeing as most consumers have already spent their money in the holiday season, they're also kind of usually recovering, and oftentimes this is when people take vacations, this is where businesses kind of are closed for a week or two, and it leads to not a lot of work for us freelancers. So because of that, I started getting a little bit afraid, a little bit worried about how I was going to pay the bills. I didn't have a very long runway, meaning I didn't have a lot of savings in order to draw from before I was going to have to go into debt. So I updated my account on Upwork, which used to be called, I believe, freelance.com or something. Essentially, it's a marketplace like Fiverr, where you post that you're available for work, the type of work you do, people put in projects, and then you actually end up bidding and pitching on the project to try to win it as a freelancer. It's generally not a great place to look for work. There is a lot of it, but it's usually low budget, fast turnaround, not ideal projects. But I was desperate, and so I decided to go there. So I get onto Upwork and I see a project. Now I have a method of actually getting good work on Upwork, which I'm going to teach to you guys in a later video. If you're interested in that, let me know. But at the time, I wouldn't take anything below a few $1,000s. They just weren't worth your time. You'd end up going back and forth and just lose money in the long run. So I found a project that was looking to pay a decent amount and was going to be a decent size project that would keep me busy for a couple of weeks. As soon as I applied for the job, I started seeing red flags. Flag number one is they were in another country and time zone. They're from Italy, and that meant that it was going to be hard to communicate. The next red flag was that they sent me a counter offer from my original proposed $5,000 budget to a budget of $3,000. After that, another red flag was their deadline was 2 weeks, which didn't really give me a lot of time to do proper planning and storyboarding as I like to do. But I gave in to my desperation. I ignored all the red flags and said, I need this job. I need this work. And this is the only one I have. So I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it for $2,000 less than I know I should. And I'm going to take it despite all the hurdles I know that are there, and despite the truncated timeline, which I knew was going to be a problem. But I decided to give in to my fear and take the project because I was worried I wouldn't have any money. So the project started and it was an absolute mess. I was having to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to join conference calls when they were in Italy. Yet another red flag was that they approved my storyboards right away. Now that might sound like a good thing as an artist, like, oh cool, I nailed it. What it usually means though, when you submit some work and there's no feedback given on it, is that they're not really looking at it. They're ignoring that because they just want to get on to the next step where they're going to try to give all the direction within the edit. And that's a mess. If you've ever worked on a project, you'd want to move past prototyping into the actual creation phase and then be making changes. That's a really bad time. You really should be making all of your big changes, edits, changes to the script, changes to the visuals in the storyboarding phase. So that way when you get to the execution phase, you can do just that, execute, rather than messing around with going back and forth on what color someone likes or font. We move on to creating, and right away we start running into problems. I make everything as I had in my storyboards and they don't like it. I tell them, well, that's what the storyboards showed, so that's what you're gonna get. And they're like, well, the problem is it's just kind of flat, right? It's all 2D animated. We would love to see some more stock footage involved. Now, at the time, there wasn't a lot of services like ArtGrid and others where you pay one price and get unlimited stock for a very long time. So instead, what you had to do is pay $80 per clip of stock footage. That was the going price. It still kind of is the going price at most of the big stock sites, but there are cheaper options now, which I highly recommend. But at the time, I didn't have any of those and I didn't have time to do research. So I ended up buying pieces of stock footage to put into the video. By the end of it, I ended up spending that first third of the cash that I was paid completely on stock footage, meaning that I was left with just $2,000 for the rest of my time. The project ended up taking the full 2 weeks, and I ended up pretty much spending every night sleepless and stressed out, and then every morning waking up at 4 for daily meetings. By the time we got done with this project, I was ready to never talk to them again, and they seemed actually very happy. They showed the video to their prospective client, and the pitch that they were doing that I was building for them seemed to go very well. So I sent them the final invoice for the last $2,000 and went back to stressing out about where I was going to find my next job. A week went by and I didn't hear back from them. So I sent them a reminder email. Hey, I still haven't heard back from you guys. Could really use that last $2,000. Another week goes by. Still nothing. Eventually 3 weeks go by and I start getting worried I'm never going to get paid. I send them another message and this time I actually get a reply back. And it's the head of the company that I was doing all this work for. He writes back saying that while they initially agreed to $3,000, they feel like the work that I delivered wasn't worth that amount. I am obviously at this point ready to tear my hair out because I spent the last 2 weeks sleeplessly working on this project, waking up for every meeting, and I've already spent all the money that they paid me to make the project that I was working on. I politely but straightforward tell them you weren't paying for the end product. The end product is a result of my work and their direction. And if they don't like it, then unfortunately, there's probably a communication error. But what in fact they were paying me for was my time and skill set. And that I've already spent and can't get back. So I would like to get paid without having to escalate this further. Now, thankfully, there is some protection on Upwork. Not really. If someone doesn't want to pay you, they don't really have to pay you. But they wanted to keep doing work on that program, on that system, and they did end up giving me the final $2,000 another couple weeks later. The whole point of me taking that job was to get money in my bank account quickly, and that didn't happen. I lost money initially on it, and then the money that I actually really needed, that $2,000 that was going to be profit, ended up not coming until far after I needed it. In the meantime, as soon as this project was over, I ended up finding a local studio that was paying me very well to freelance for them over the next few months and actually had no problems financially whatsoever. So obviously in this case, the thing I was being afraid of was not having money in my bank account right away and stressing out and losing sleep due to the lack of incoming cash. And in fact, what happened by making this decision based in fear was exactly that. I ended up not having money in my bank account. I ended up stressing out and having sleepless nights because I was working on this project all the time, and ended up spending that time not looking for other jobs that as soon as this job was ended, I found one right away that I probably could have found 2 weeks earlier. By making this fear-based decision, I ended up being drowned in all the things I was afraid of happening. Thankfully, after the project was over, I had some time to look back and think about what went wrong. Originally, I just wanted to blame the client for all the problems. Obviously, they're the ones that didn't plan ahead. They're the ones that only had 2 weeks. They're the ones that refused to pay and wanted to change the project halfway through. But really, it was my fault. It was my fault for taking the project in the first place when I knew I shouldn't have. And at that moment, I made a deal with myself to never again make a decision based in fear. And I'm glad to say I've kept that promise to myself. There are moments where I'm tempted to make a decision based in fear, especially a business decision. But whenever I'm tempted to do that, I think back to that one job I did that was such a nightmare because I made a fear-based decision and stopped myself. So what do you do though? What do you do instead? And how do you stop yourself from making fear-based decisions when they arise? Obviously, there's a lot of fear in the world, and if the media had their way, we'd all be constantly peeing our pants. You have to be able to stop. So the first thing to do in order to not make a fear-based decision is, once you feel that fear starting, is to stop and think. The worst thing you can do is rush. Rushing causes so many problems. I see this all the time. Whenever there's a project that's coming in late or a deadline's coming up, people tend to rush. And 9 times out of 10, the rushing itself is what causes problems. If you were just to stick your head down and push through at the same rate that you were going, but being sure to cross your T's and dot your I's, you'd come out the other end with a solid product that people appreciate, even if it's a few minutes late. Instead, we rush to meet this deadline, and in the rush, we end up screwing up something and having to redo it, and then we screw it up again and have to redo it. How many times, for those of you that do video work, have you had to re-render a project because you were rushing, and then when you hit render and you saw the end product, you didn't realize you forgot to turn on a layer, color correct a certain scene, you had a typo in one of your title cards. This happens all the time. So the first step is to stop, slow down, and breathe. It's going to be okay. Okay, I want to make this decision. I want to start acting right away. I want to fix the problem. Which is an attitude I like far more than the type of person that just wants to sit and wallow in their fear. Don't sit and wallow, but do take a step to breathe and then truly look at your scenarios. How dangerous is this thing? How close is it to actually hurting me? Do I need to act right away, or can I come up with a proper plan of action? That's what you need to be doing. Train yourself when something scary happens or when something comes up, not to just react, but to take a step back, think, breathe, and then move forward. The next step is to look for warning signs. Be aware of red flags. Start making a plan of action, but if you look at your plan of action and you start seeing that there's these little red flags of either fear or stupidity on your end or someone else's, to pay attention to those. Don't put up blinders. I think a lot of times what we want to do is, as soon as something that scares us shows up, we block out everything else and just start running straight for, in a straight line. There's a scene in Prometheus that has always really bothered me, and 2 of the characters are running away from something that's falling very, very, very slowly onto them, and if they just went to the right or the left, they'd be fine, but instead they run in a straight line to try to avoid it, and it ends up crushing one of them, of course. And you're like, you idiot, if you just would have turned right. But in reality, we do put on blinders when we're afraid. We just get stuck on our one solution, and we get so stuck on it that we refuse to do anything else. There are plenty of times when a red flag showed up where I could have shut down that project. I really should have. Any one of those red flags been like, no, sorry, but I was put up my blinders. I said, this is the only solution. These are the only people that are going to give me money. Nobody else is going to help me. This is the only way I can do it, so I have to stick with it. Don't do that. Don't put up blinders, and don't commit to one solution, and be aware of red flags. The next solution is more of a mindset one, and it's kind of a little stereotypical at this point. I hesitate to even say it, but it is really true. And that's that you need to have an abundance mindset and not a scarcity mindset. Rather than looking at an option when it pops up, like the job that I saw, and looking at that as your only choice because it's so scarce, there's nothing else, have an abundancy mindset. Have this idea that this is one option of many, not the only option. If one solution doesn't work out, that's fine. There's going to be another one. The same thing with clients. If you're a creative or a business, realizing that I can move on from this one opportunity to another one. I don't have to commit to this one market that I'm in that's currently suffering. I'm seeing a lot of businesses do this. They are serving a current market that's currently suffering due to the economic climate that we're in. And rather than trying to reach out to new markets, they double down on their current market. They try to serve them in different ways. And that's good. You should do that. But also, don't be so committed to your one market. Like, look at other ones you can move into. Look at adjacent markets, ones that aren't suffering, or ways to move your current clients to one of these markets. That's, I think, all a better idea than doubling down on your current market and trying to get them, who are so uncertain and so fearful themselves, to aid in your fear. It's going to be a mistake. So have a positive mindset, have a mindset of abundance, that there's going to be more options to come along. Like I said, it sounds kind of woo-woo and stereotypical and stuff like that, but it really does change the way you operate. It really puts the leverage back on your side. You have the option to say no to this because you know there's going to be more options down the way, rather than being stuck and committed to one idea. So hopefully this gives you a place to take a step back, to breathe, to not make your decisions made in fear. Take a moment to think, look for red flags, take off your blinders, and really move forward confidently without falling for a scarcity mindset. Remember, fear only serves you by handing you over to the thing you fear. I'm not going to keep adding these disclaimers to every video, but just because you don't want to act on fear doesn't mean something's not dangerous. In my case, I needed to find new work. That was true. But the way you go about it isn't motivated by fear. It's motivated by what's the next opportunity, how can I move forward, and you turn off that fear that initially lets you know about the issue. Fear does serve a purpose in that it lets us know something's dangerous, right? If I'm standing next to a rattlesnake and I hear its tail go off, that fear that kicks in letting me know I'm in danger is good. Now, what's bad is the action I take directly after, which might be to make a sudden, sharp movement. That would be the wrong choice in that case. A better one would be to remain calm and walk away slowly, facing it so I can keep my eye on what's happening. Once again, they're more afraid of you than you are of them. And this is the same thing with clients. Like, they're also afraid, they're also worrying. So don't make sudden, brash decisions. But when you feel that fear, recognize it, know that it's valuable, that it let you know that there's a problem, and then put it in its right place and move on slowly and assuredly with your blinders off. So I'm hoping this helps a lot of you right now. If you're in a moment of fear, if you're in a moment where there's some unrest, or maybe you even lost your job or something like that, let me know. Also, if you are hurting, if you did lose your job, leave me a comment or DM me on Instagram or anywhere else, and let me know, because I hire freelancers regularly. I'm trying to give people work. If you're a creative that needs some work, feel free to reach out. If you're a business that needs work, I'm more than happy to help you strategize on options that might help you gain some income in new and interesting ways. So that being said, hit like. No need to smash. Everyone's like, smash like. Don't smash like. Just gently caress it. It doesn't need to be abused. Just caress that like button, and I'll see you in the next one.